The person you love is urging you to read this message immediately. Because something huge just happened. My beloved child, stop for just one quiet moment, because what you are about to hear was never meant to arrive by accident. There are moments that look ordinary from the outside but silently rewrite everything within. This is one of them. The person your heart has never truly forgotten has been carrying something that can no longer remain unspoken. It is not a coincidence that your eyes found these words today. A door that seemed permanently closed has shifted ever so slightly, and that tiny movement is more powerful than anyone realizes. Stay with this message a little longer, because the beginning rarely reveals the full story. Imagine receiving a message before your phone even vibrates. Strange thought, isn't it? Yet some messages travel long before they become words. They move through intuition, unexpected memories, impossible timing, and quiet feelings that refuse to disappear. Recently, something changed around the person you love. Not a dramatic event that everyone could see, but an invisible turning point that altered the direction of their thoughts. They reached a place where pretending became heavier than telling the truth. And that is why this moment feels different from every other one that came before it. Have you noticed how certain memories have appeared without warning? A familiar smile crossing your mind. A song you had not heard in months. A random feeling that someone was thinking about you at the exact same moment. Many people dismiss these moments as coincidence. But what if they are gentle echoes of a story preparing to reveal its next chapter? What if your heart sensed the shift before your mind could explain it? Listen carefully. The message is not asking you to rush. It is asking you to remain awake. There is a difference. When life begins arranging pieces behind the scenes, impatience only creates noise. Awareness creates clarity. The person you love has begun seeing your absence in a completely different light. What once felt familiar now feels incomplete. What once seemed distant suddenly feels close enough to reach. They are starting to recognize details they overlooked before. The kindness they underestimated, the silence they misunderstood, the connection they quietly carried without realizing its true value. But here is the surprising part. The huge change was not something they discovered about you. It was something they discovered about themselves. For the first time in a long while, they stopped running from the questions they had been avoiding. They looked honestly at their own choices, their own fears, and the walls they had built without noticing. Sometimes the greatest breakthrough is not finding someone new. It is finally understanding the value of someone who was already written into your story. Pause for a second. Can you remember a moment when you almost gave up on something, only to realize later that it was growing quietly beneath the surface? Life often works exactly like that. The deepest transformations happen where nobody is looking. While the world celebrates loud victories, destiny often whispers its greatest announcements. This whisper is one of them. The person you love has been replaying conversations in their mind. Not because they enjoy living in the past, but because the meaning behind those moments has changed. Words that once seemed ordinary now carry extraordinary weight. Even silence has begun speaking to them in ways they never expected. Every unanswered question has become a reason to seek understanding instead of distance. You may wonder why this realization is happening now. Because every journey reaches a point where truth becomes impossible to ignore. That point has arrived. Not with fireworks. Not with dramatic scenes. But with a quiet certainty that keeps growing stronger every single day. And here's something even more remarkable. While they are searching for the courage to move closer, life is also preparing you. Every delay has been teaching patience. Every unanswered moment has been strengthening your ability to recognize what truly matters when it finally appears. The timing may have seemed confusing before, but confusion often comes just before clarity steps into the light. So don't leave just yet. The next piece of this story explains what happened that made this inner change impossible to reverse. Once you understand that hidden moment, everything you've questioned until now will begin fitting together in a way you never expected. Not so fast, because the part you are about to hear is where the silence finally begins to reveal its hidden meaning. What happened was not loud enough for the world to notice, yet it was powerful enough to change someone's entire direction. The person you love reached a moment they never planned for. A moment where every distraction faded, and one truth refused to leave their mind. No matter how hard they tried to move forward as if nothing had changed, one thought kept returning, you. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever tried to ignore a feeling, only for it to become stronger each day? That is exactly what unfolded. The more they attempted to convince themselves everything was fine, the clearer it became that something important was still unfinished. It wasn't regret alone. It wasn't nostalgia alone. It was realization. And realization has a quiet power that cannot be argued with. Then something unexpected happened. A conversation, perhaps with a trusted friend, perhaps during a quiet evening alone, perhaps after witnessing someone else's story, became a mirror. Instead of seeing another person's life, they suddenly saw their own. For the first time, they asked themselves a question they had avoided for far too long. What if I misunderstood the one person who truly mattered? That single question changed everything. From that moment forward, familiar memories no longer felt ordinary. They became clues. Small moments that once seemed insignificant suddenly carried meaning. A smile they had forgotten. A conversation they never fully appreciated. A goodbye they assumed was permanent. Piece by piece, the picture became impossible to ignore. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. The change wasn't driven by fear of losing something. It was driven by finally understanding its value. There is an enormous difference. When people act from fear, they rush. When they act from understanding, they move with intention. And intention has the power to reshape the future. Now imagine someone quietly gathering the courage to rewrite a chapter they once believed was finished. That journey is rarely visible from the outside. It happens in ordinary moments. In silence, in reflection, in unexpected flashes of clarity. Yet those invisible moments often become the beginning of extraordinary outcomes. Perhaps that is why you felt drawn here today. Not because every answer has already arrived, but because the first undeniable shift already has. If this message has spoken to something deep within you, leave a comment with the word "ready." Sometimes putting a hopeful intention into words reminds us to stay open to life's next chapter. And if these stories bring you clarity, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next, because every chapter builds upon the last. Now let this thought settle. What if the biggest event wasn't something happening around either of you? What if it was happening within both of you at the very same time? While they were learning the courage to face the truth, you were quietly becoming stronger through every unanswered question. Neither journey was wasted. Every delay carried a lesson. Every pause shaped a different kind of wisdom. Sometimes two paths appear separate only because they are being prepared to meet from stronger foundations. And there is one final detail you haven't heard yet. The person you love has not only recognized what changed. They are beginning to see what must happen next. That decision is still unfolding, and the reason behind it is far more surprising than anyone could have predicted. Stay with this story, because the next chapter reveals why this turning point could become the moment that changes everything. Before your thoughts begin to race ahead, listen to this with complete attention, because the next revelation is not about chance, it is about perspective. The person you love did not wake up one morning with every answer. Instead, they experienced something far more powerful. They stopped asking, "What did I lose?" and started asking, "What have I been overlooking all this time?" That single shift changed the direction of everything. It is amazing how quickly the heart begins to recognize truth once the noise becomes quiet. The endless distractions that once filled every empty space slowly lost their influence. The opinions of others became less important. The need to appear strong faded away. And in that silence, one thought remained clear enough to outlast every distraction. You. Not as a passing memory. Not as an unfinished chapter. But as someone whose presence had left a mark far deeper than they had ever admitted, even to themselves. Picture a traveler standing at a crossroads after walking for miles in the wrong direction. They could keep moving simply because they have already come so far, or they could pause, turn around, and finally walk toward what truly matters. That decision is never easy. It requires honesty. It requires courage. Most of all, it requires letting go of pride. And something inside them has begun doing exactly that. The huge event hinted at from the very beginning was never about a dramatic announcement or a sudden miracle that everyone could witness. It was the collapse of an old belief. A belief that said, "Time will erase this." Instead, time revealed the opposite. Distance did not erase what was real. Silence did not weaken what was meaningful. Waiting did not destroy the connection. It revealed its depth. Have you ever noticed how certain stars only become visible after the sky grows dark? Some truths appear the same way. They cannot be seen while life is loud. They reveal themselves only after everything unnecessary fades into the background. That is where they are now. Seeing clearly. Feeling honestly. Questioning less. Understanding more. Yet there is another side to this story that matters just as much. While they have been discovering these truths, you have also been changing in ways you may not even recognize. Challenges have refined your patience. Uncertainty has strengthened your intuition. Moments that once felt empty have quietly prepared you to recognize genuine intention instead of temporary emotion. Because when two people grow separately, they often return to the same story with entirely different hearts. Now ask yourself something. If tomorrow suddenly placed an unexpected opportunity in front of you, would you recognize it, or would you dismiss it because it arrived differently than you imagined? Sometimes destiny does not knock on the front door. Sometimes it appears through a simple conversation. A surprising coincidence. A familiar name. Or one quiet moment that feels strangely unforgettable. The future is rarely announced with certainty. It arrives through small moments that ask one simple question. Are you paying attention now? This is why today's message matters so deeply. It is not asking you to predict the future. It is inviting you to remain open enough to notice the opportunities that fear once taught you to overlook. There is incredible strength in someone who can move forward without bitterness, who can welcome clarity without forcing outcomes, and who can trust that every meaningful connection deserves understanding before judgment. So don't let impatience write the ending to a story that is still unfolding. There is still another page waiting to be turned. And on that page, a choice will emerge. One that neither of you expected at the beginning of this journey, yet one that has been quietly preparing itself all along. Stay close. Because what comes next is not simply about what the person you love is thinking. It is about the step they are finally becoming ready to take, and why that single decision could reshape everything that follows. Take one more step with me, because this is the moment where possibility begins transforming into intention. Until now, everything has been happening beneath the surface, hidden from ordinary sight. Thoughts were changing. Feelings were becoming clearer. But every meaningful story eventually reaches the point where reflection is no longer enough. That point is closer than anyone realizes. The person you love has started understanding that waiting forever is also a decision. Remaining silent has its own consequences. Letting fear make every choice only creates more unanswered questions. And for the first time in a very long while, they are beginning to imagine what could happen if they simply chose honesty over hesitation. Imagine standing before a bridge you have avoided crossing for years. The bridge has never disappeared. Only the courage to step onto it was missing. Now, little by little, that courage is beginning to grow. Not because every fear has vanished, but because something more important has finally become stronger than fear itself. Hope. Hope has a remarkable way of changing how people see the same path. Yesterday it looked impossible. Today it looks uncertain. Tomorrow it may look like the only road worth taking. Perhaps that is exactly what is unfolding. The person you love is no longer searching for perfect timing. They are beginning to understand that perfect moments rarely announce themselves. They are created by people who decide that truth matters more than comfort. And there is something you should remember as you listen to these words. You were never asked to carry the entire future on your shoulders. You were only asked to remain true to yourself while the next chapter quietly prepared its arrival. That is why every challenge you have faced has served a purpose. It strengthened your ability to recognize sincerity. It taught you the difference between temporary excitement and lasting connection. It reminded you that genuine understanding always grows stronger than uncertainty. Now pause for a heartbeat. What if this message reached you today not because everything has already happened, but because you are standing at the edge of a brand new beginning? Some beginnings are loud. Others arrive like the first light before sunrise, soft, gentle, almost unnoticed. Yet they change everything. If these messages have brought you encouragement or a new perspective, consider sharing this journey with someone who may need it today. And if you enjoy stories that inspire reflection and hope, subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring these moments together in future videos. Now listen carefully to this final thought. The next move may not arrive exactly the way you expect. It could appear through an unexpected conversation. A familiar name suddenly returning. A coincidence that feels too meaningful to ignore. Or a simple moment that makes your heart pause for reasons you cannot explain. Do not rush to define it. Let it reveal itself. Because the greatest transformations rarely begin with certainty, they begin with awareness. And awareness is exactly what has brought you here today. So leave this moment carrying one quiet truth with you. The story between two hearts is never shaped by fear alone. It is shaped by the courage to see clearly, the patience to grow wisely, and the willingness to recognize an opportunity when it finally appears. Sometimes the biggest thing that just happened is invisible to everyone else. But it becomes the very reason an entirely new future is finally able to begin. One last layer remains, and this may be the piece that changes the way you remember everything that came before. Stories often appear to move forward in straight lines, but the most meaningful ones don't. They circle back, revealing that every delay, every unanswered moment, and every unexpected turn was quietly leading toward a single realization. That realization has finally arrived. The person you love is no longer asking whether this connection mattered. They already know it did. Now they are asking themselves something far more important. What kind of future becomes possible if I stop letting uncertainty make my decisions? That question carries extraordinary power. Because every meaningful change begins with one honest decision. Not a perfect decision. Not a fearless decision. An honest one. For so long, they believed time alone would provide every answer. They expected the days to slowly erase emotions that felt too complicated to understand. Instead, time became a mirror. It reflected every lesson they had avoided, every feeling they had postponed, and every memory that quietly refused to disappear. Some people think clarity arrives all at once. It rarely does. It comes like dawn. First a faint light. Then a brighter horizon. Then suddenly you realize the darkness has already disappeared. That is exactly where this story stands now. The horizon has changed. The light is growing stronger. And what once felt impossible no longer feels beyond reach. But here is something equally important for you. Do not measure your future by yesterday's silence. Silence is not always the end of a conversation. Sometimes it is simply the place where understanding is learning how to speak. As you move forward from this moment, carry confidence instead of questions. Carry peace instead of pressure. Allow life to surprise you instead of demanding that every answer appear immediately. The strongest chapters are never forced into existence, they unfold one meaningful step at a time. Perhaps that is why this message found you today. Not to promise an exact outcome. Not to predict every detail. but to remind you that hope becomes stronger when it is supported by patience, wisdom, and an open heart. One day you may look back on this very moment and realize it was never just another video. It was a pause. A reminder. A turning point that encouraged you to notice what your heart had been quietly trying to tell you all along. So walk forward with calm confidence. Keep your heart open. Keep your spirit steady. Keep believing that meaningful moments often arrive without announcing themselves first. Because sometimes the biggest event isn't the message someone sends. It is the decision they make before pressing send. And when that decision is finally made with honesty, courage, and clarity, an entirely new chapter becomes possible. This story may be ending here.